Translation and purport by His Divine Grace A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki jai. Translation: Maitreya said, "Eternal time is the primeval source of the interactions of the three modes of material nature. It is unchangeable and limitless, and it works as the instrument of the Supreme Personality of Godhead for His pastimes in the material creation." Purport: The impersonal time factor is the background of the material manifestation as the instrument of the Supreme Lord. It is the ingredient of assistance offered to material nature. No one knows where time began and where it ends, and it is time only which can keep a record of the creation, maintenance, and destruction of the material manifestation. This time factor is the material cause of creation and is therefore a self-expansion of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. Time is considered the impersonal feature of the Lord. The time factor is also explained by modern men in various ways. Some accept it almost as it is explained in the Srimad Bhagavatam. For example, in Hebrew literature, time is accepted in the same spirit as a representation of God. It is said therein, "God, who at sundry times and in diverse manners spake in time past unto the fathers by the prophets." Metaphysically, time is distinguished as absolute and real. Absolute time is continuous and is unaffected by the speed or slowness of material things. Time is astronomically and mathematically calculated in relation to the speed, change, and life of a particular object. Factually, however, time has nothing to do with the relativities of things. Rather, everything is shaped and calculated in terms of the facility offered by time. Time is the basic measurement of the activity of our senses, by which we calculate past, present, and future. But in factual calculation, time has no beginning and no end. Pandita Chanakya says that even a slight fraction of time cannot be purchased with millions of dollars, and therefore even a moment of time lost without profit must be calculated as the greatest loss in life. Time is not subject to any form of psychology, nor are the moments objective realities in themselves, but they are dependent on particular experiences. Therefore, Srila Jiva Goswami concludes that the time factor is intermixed with the activities, actions, and reactions of the external energy of the Lord. The external energy of the external energy, all material nature, works under the superintendence of the time factor as the Lord Himself, and that is why material nature appears to have produced so many wonderful things in the cosmic manifestation. Bhagavad Gita 9.10 confirms this conclusion as follows: Maya dyakshena prakriti suyate sacharacharam hetunanena kaunteya jagat viparivartate. Om jnanatimirandasya jnananjana shalakaya chakshunmilitam yena tasmai shri gurave namaha. Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Srivasari Gaur Bhaktivinoda. Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. So we understand that whatever is created is also destroyed. The spirit soul is not created, and therefore the spirit soul is not destroyed. Bhagavad Gita says, "Avyaktadini bhutani vyaktamadhyani bharata, avyakta nidanani eva tatraka paridevana." This is one of the reasons that Lord Sri Krishna gives to Arjuna why he should not lament for the impending death of his relatives. He says everything in the mature world has a beginning, it has a period of manifestation, and it has a period of annihilation. So in the inevitable discharge of your duty, don't lament, Arjuna. Now, it might be asked, why is Vidura asking his spiritual teacher, his spiritual master, Maitreya Muni, about time? The context of this part of Srimad Bhagavatam is all about creation. But, as I mentioned just now, anything which is created is also destroyed in due course of time. So the reason why Vidura is asking Maitreya about time is because he wants to know the things which Brahma is creating at the start of creation. How long do these things last for? And that is where the context or the topic of time comes into this. Kalas tatatma manisiti jagatriyani. This is one of the energies of Krishna, as Srila Prabhupada is mentioning in the purport as well. Time is time is considered the impersonal feature of the Lord. I remember when Hanuman Prasika Maharaj was here, many, many years back. He said that the external manifestation of the supersoul is the time factor. So there's no difference between the supersoul within one's heart and the time factor without oneself. So the time factor is the external, impersonal feature of the Supreme Personality of Godhead. And here, in the translation, Srimad Bhagavatam is saying, the time is unchangeable and limitless, and it works as the instrument of the Supreme Personality of Godhead for what? For His pastimes. Now, in the spiritual world, time is conspicuous by its absence. Nimeshardakhyava navrajati yatrapi samaya. Lord Brahma prays to Krishna. He says, in the spiritual world, time is transcendental. That means time is only there to enhance Krishna's pastimes. If Krishna wants it to be nighttime because he wants to dance with the gopis, then the time will change and the moon will come up, the autumn moon will come up, the sun will set, and Krishna will enjoy. But such things don't happen in the mature world because things have to follow certain laws. When it's daytime, it can't be nighttime at the same time. But still, Krishna uses time, material time, to facilitate his pastimes. Krishna's pastimes in the material world happen through the medium of material time. For example, we know from Srila Prabhupada's purports in the Bhagavad Gita, Prabhupada mentions that Krishna appears at the end of Dwapar Yuga, in the 7th Manu, in the 28th Chatur Yuga. That's when Krishna appears. And in the Kali Yuga following that, that's when Lord Chaitanya appears. So Krishna sticks to a particular time scale to appear within the mature world. We see, recently I was reading about Bhakti Vikas Maharaj. He's translated Ramayana. Very nice short summary of the book. And I was reading the Uttarakhanda, which is the last part of Ramayana. After the whole Yuddha, after the whole war between the monkey army and Ravana's Rakshas army. So then Ravana dies and Lord Ramachandra is established as the king of Ayodhya again. Vibhishana becomes the king of Lanka. But then in the Uttarakhanda, which is the last part of Ramayana, the whole history of Lord Ravana is given. Before he was called Ravana, he was called Dashagriva, which means one who has 10 necks, because he had 10 heads. So it's called Dashagriva. Griva means neck. So Ravana, who had 10 necks. Now he went around, after he got the benedictions from Lord Brahma, he went around wreaking havoc, just like Hiranyakshipu. He went and challenged Yamaraj. He went and challenged Varuna. He went and challenged Indra. He went and even tried to challenge Lord Shiva. But Lord Shiva crushed his hands under a huge mountain just by placing his big toe on the surface of the mountain. And his hands were getting crushed for 1,000 years. This is when Ravana came to his senses and he thought, I should not challenge Lord Shiva, I should glorify him. So while he was glorifying Lord Shiva, because of the pain he was feeling, he was intensely crying out in agony as well. This crying of Ravana still gave fear to the demigods. That is why Lord Shiva awarded Dashagriva with the name Ravana, one who makes the demigods cry. Now, many times these demigods, they went and approached Lord Vishnu to come and help, because Ravana was gaining power, he was gaining allies. But Vishnu says to them, now is not the time. I will come later in the future. I will come as an avatar. I will come in the form of a human being. And I will kill Ravana. But for now, just tolerate what Ravana is doing. Again, Krishna sticks to time in terms of appearing within the material world. Another instance where Krishna is sticking to time is, if you've read the Adi Leela of Chaitanya Charitamrita, you'll see there that Krishna is thinking that, when I came as Krishna, and I did my pastimes in Vrindavan and Dwarka and Mathura, and I went back, I saw that my devotees, specifically Srimati Radharani, she was enjoying more than me. What does it feel like to be in the position of my devotee? What are the qualities within me which my devotees find blissful, find attractive in me? And what is the happiness, what is the quality of the happiness which my devotees relish in association with me? To understand these three confidential reasons, CC says, Chaitanya Charitamrita says, Krishna came as Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, but Krishnadas Kaviraj Goswami explains, this desire of Krishna coincided with the time at which Krishna was supposed to appear as a Yuga avatar, to preach the external reason why Lord Chaitanya came, which was to spread the Yuga Dharma. So this desire of Lord Chaitanya to experience how pleasurable it is to be his own devotee coincided with the time at which Lord Chaitanya was supposed to come, or the Yuga avatar was supposed to come. So Krishna and his activities within the material world, his leela, his pastimes, Krishna engages material time in that as well. Towards the end of the purport, Srila Prabhupada is mentioning something interesting. He's saying, the external energy or material nature works under the superintendence of the time factor as the Lord himself, and that is why material nature appears to have produced so many wonderful things. You know that example that sometimes, Prabhupada used to give this example, that from a bag of rice, a scorpion will come. So people say, the bag of rice, the rice is the reason why the scorpion is coming out of the bag of rice. So in the same way, we think that life and everything that's happening is arising out of the material energy. We can give another really crude example. Let's say you have a husband and a wife, and the wife is pregnant, and then she gives birth to a child, to her son or daughter. Now, a very unintelligent observer, when he sees the child coming from the wife's body, he may conclude that the wife is the reason or the cause of the creation of the child. But there's a cause before that, and that is the father. So, Krishna is compared to be the father, the time factor, and material energy is considered to be the mother. Now, if one doesn't consider Krishna, then one will think that material energy, material energy is creating life. But actually, we have to understand that before that, there was an original cause. Krishna himself had implanted already the jivas within material nature so that they could take their birth. So everything which is happening in our life is because of time, through the passage of time. Let's say, and Prabhupada is mentioning here in the purport, he's talking about, here it is. He's saying, time is not subject to any form of psychology, nor are the moments objective realities in themselves, but they are dependent on particular experiences. Therefore, Jiva Goswami concludes that time factor is intermixed with activities, actions, and reactions. So what does that mean? Well, it means that we can only perceive the effects of time through things changing and morphing around us. Right? We can understand that time exists because we see the sun rises and it's moving throughout the day and then it sets finally. Because we're seeing that motion of the sun, we can understand that time exists. Because we're getting the results of our karma, we can understand time is passing. Let's say if you're sitting in a room, in a dungeon, and it's completely sealed off. There's no windows, you can't see outside, and it's even dark. It's just you're just sitting in a completely concealed dark room. Would you be able to perceive the effects of time? It'd be very difficult because you're not seeing anything being created, being maintained, and being destroyed around you. But over a long period of time, like 60 years, 70 years, if you're still sitting in that dark room, then you'll feel, hey, my body's getting old. You'll feel your body's getting old. Then you'll be able to perceive the effects of time. So Prabhupada is saying that time, to be able to understand time or perceive it, it depends on particular experiences. So we need to see time influencing other things, material nature, to be able to understand that time exists. Now, Srila Prabhupada is introducing this thing called relativities of things. And I was thinking whether or not I should speak about this, but it's a little technical, but it's also very fascinating. And I need you to really focus to be able to understand this. And I'm going to relate this to Shastra. I'm going to talk about one of the most prevailing scientific theories in the last century, in the last 120 years now. You'll probably heard of the theory of relativity, Einstein's theory of relativity. So this is a theory which Albert Einstein first of all conceived of in 1905, and then he developed it further in, I think, 1908, 1909 or something like that. And the reason I'm talking about this is because it relates to the topic of time. But I don't want to, I'm not saying that it's true, nor am I saying that it's false. I'm just going to state what the theory is by explaining it. And I'm going to explain it in the form of two different thought experiments. So I want you to do a thought experiment. I want you to use your imagination. I want you to use your visualization abilities so that you can understand this theory. But the reason I'm going to talk about this is to show how advanced our scriptures are, how advanced Srimad Bhagavatam is, Vedic culture and Vedic knowledge is, that they were talking about things which scientists are discovering recently, within the last century. Now, in the field of physics, probably there are two different scientists which are, let's say, the acharyas, the topmost scientists. One is Isaac Newton, and one is Albert Einstein. Right? We all know them. Now, according to Isaac Newton, his Newtonian physics, he says that time is a universal constant. What that means is that wherever you are situated in the universe, time is experienced in the same way by everyone. That means if I'm here on Earth, I'm experiencing time in a certain way. If I was like billions and billions of miles away somewhere else in the universe, I would be experiencing the exact same time. But if we read our Shastra, we understand that is not true. Srila Prabhupada mentions that our one day, let's say 12 hours on Earth, is equal to, our one day here is equal to, our 6 months here is equal to 12 hours of the residence in Swargaloka, Prabhupada mentions. Similarly, our 24 hours here, our 1 year here is equal to, I'm getting confused now. Our 1 year here, 12 months, is equal to one 24-hour period of the demigods in Swargaloka. We see Brahma's lifespan is so vast. And Brahma experiences time in a different way to how we experience time. So our Shastra says that time is felt and experienced differently according to where you are situated in the universe and what type of body you have. So that goes against what Newton was saying, because Newton was saying is that time is experienced in the same way by everyone. Then came Albert Einstein, and he introduced this theory of relativity, which says that time is experienced differently according to where you are situated in the universe and the speed at which you're traveling. His theory was based on one foundational principle, that the speed of light is constant for everybody. Regardless of how fast one is traveling, one sees the speed of light as being the same. And that is something which is mentioned within Srimad Bhagavatam as well. For example, if you read Canto 3, it's the same canto. If you read Kapila Muni's teachings to his mother Devahuti, there he's, and the chapter is titled Calculating Time from the Atom. The smallest unit of time, according to Srimad Bhagavatam, is called atomic time. Atomic time is the time it takes for a particle of light, so like a photon or something, the time it takes for a particle of light to travel or cover the distance, the diameter of one atom. So it's a really, really small unit of time. Srimad Bhagavatam uses that minute amount of time to calculate the entire lifespan of Brahma. So you can just imagine how advanced Srimad Bhagavatam is. Okay, so let me explain this theory of relativity. So there's two theories of relativities which Einstein conceived of. The first one that he conceived of was called special relativity. The second one that he conceived of is called general relativity. So I'm going to talk about special relativity through the use of a thought experiment, and I'll explain what the thought experiment is. Assume you have a device known as a light clock. What is a light clock? A light clock is basically two mirrors on top of each other, okay? And they're separated by a certain distance. In between these two mirrors is one particle of light, so one photon particle. And because light is reflected by mirrors, this photon particle is constantly being reflected between these two mirrors. Now, these two mirrors are at a certain distance apart from each other. For the sake of simplicity, and I'm oversimplifying this theory, just to explain it, there's a lot more details in this. Let's say the two mirrors are a distance of 1 meter apart, and it takes that light particle 1 second to go from the top mirror to the bottom mirror. Easy so far? So we know the equation speed equals distance over time. So what is the speed of this light particle? It travels 1 meter in 1 second. So 1 divided by 1 is 1. Of course, the speed of light is something like 300 million meters per second, but we're just simplifying it. So you have two mirrors, and the light is bouncing, and the speed of light here is 1 meter per second. It's taking 1 second for that light particle to go from the top mirror to the bottom mirror. Okay? Now let's say that light clock is being held by a person standing stationary on the ground. So he's seeing that light particle move from the top mirror to the bottom mirror in 1 second, and same way, moving from the bottom mirror to the top mirror in 1 second. Now, let's consider another person. He's also carrying a light clock with him, but he's traveling in a supersonic jet, let's say a fighter jet, at the speed of sound, maybe faster than the speed of sound, and he's also carrying the light clock. Now, what is he experiencing? What he's experiencing is that because he's traveling at a really fast speed, the mirrors which are on board of that aircraft, they're also traveling at the same speed of the aircraft as well. Right? Now, the light particle within those mirrors, it can no longer just go vertically. It can no longer just reflect itself vertically. Because the mirrors are moving, the path of the trajectory of the light particle also has to be calibrated so that it now hits the two mirrors by traveling in a diagonal path, because the mirrors are moving, so then the light particle is also traveling diagonally. Does it make sense so far? What that means is that to go from the top mirror to the bottom mirror, the distance that that light particle has to travel has now increased. Because on the ground it's just traveling vertically, but on that aircraft which is traveling at a really fast speed, it's traveling diagonally. That means it has to travel a longer distance from the top mirror to the bottom mirror, or from the bottom mirror to the top mirror. Now again, we can apply the equation speed equals distance over time. Remember, the theory of relativity is based on speed of light being constant. So both the person on the ground and the person in the aircraft traveling at a fast velocity, they're experiencing the speed of light as being the same. We calculated the speed of light for the person on the ground as being 1 meter per second, right? Because we divided 1 meter divided by 1 second is 1 meter per second. Now for the person in the aircraft, let's say the distance that the light particle has to travel, let's say it's increased to 5 meters, because now it's traveling a diagonal path. So the equation we have now is that speed, which is 1 meter per second, equals distance. The distance has increased to 5 meters over time. Now for the speed of light to be constant, time has to increase as well. So we have to have 5 divided by 5, which equals to 1 meter per second. So for the person who's traveling on the aircraft, he's also seeing the light particle bounce from the top mirror to the bottom mirror, but for him it's taking 5 seconds. Whereas for the person on the ground, it's taking only 1 second. Does that make sense? So Einstein's theory of special relativity explains that the faster you travel, time slows down for you. Such that if you're traveling at the speed of light, time stops existing for you. This is his theory of special relativity. Okay, so understood so far? Now let's talk about general relativity. General relativity introduces the effect of gravity. Now, imagine you have a really big trampoline. Okay, so this is another thought experiment that I'd like you to do. A really big trampoline, let's say it's like 10, 15, 20 meters big. It's a big round trampoline. Now let's take a bowling ball, a heavy bowling ball, 10-pin bowling ball, and put it in the center of the trampoline. What happens to the trampoline? It curves, right? It curves because of the weight. Now, according to Newton, Newton said that gravity is this invisible, invisible force which pulls things towards heavy things. So if I have a really heavy bowling ball with a lot of mass, and I have a particle of dust. So gravity is this force which is being exuded outwards by the bowling ball, which is attracting that tiny particle of dust, which is, relatively speaking, it's very light, and it's coming and it's getting attracted to the bowling ball. But Einstein conceived of gravity as being something different. Einstein said that because time is relative and distance is also relative, to keep the speed of light constant, speed equals distance over time, speed is constant, therefore distance can change and time can change to accommodate the speed of light being constant. So he conceived that our space is like that trampoline. When you have heavy planets with heavy mass sitting in space, the fabric of space, which he called space-time, it curves under the planets. Just like the trampoline, it curves under the weight of the bowling ball. Now let's imagine the trampoline again. We have a bowling ball in the center. Now let's get a little ping pong ball. And let's put that ping pong ball close to that bowling ball. What's going to happen? It's going to come and it's going to get attracted to the bowling ball. Why? Because the trampoline is curved like that. So same way, if you have the planet Earth sitting in space, the fabric of space, called space-time, is curved under planet Earth. That's why smaller objects with a smaller mass, they're attracted towards Earth because they're falling into that curvature. Just like a ping pong ball would fall into the curvature of the trampoline and get attracted to the bowling ball. Does that make sense so far? So he conceived of gravity as being like this, the curvature of space-time. Now let's get that trampoline again. There's nothing on the trampoline at all. Let's say it's just a flat trampoline. Now let me draw 2 points, point A and point B, right at the center of the trampoline. And these 2 points are, let's say, 10 centimeters apart. So we have a trampoline. Right at the center of the trampoline, I'm drawing 2 points. Point A, point B, they're 10 centimeters apart. Now let me draw points C and D on the edge, the outermost edge of the trampoline. So points A and B are 10 centimeters apart. Points C and D are also 10 centimeters apart. But A and B is in the center of the trampoline, and C and D is right at the edge of the trampoline. And remember, it's a really big trampoline. Now let me put a bowling ball in the center of the trampoline. What happens to the distance between points A and B? Because the trampoline curves, the distance between points A and B increases, right? Because previously it was a flat trampoline, now it's curved, and if you follow the curve, now the curved distance between points A and B has increased. Whereas points C and D, which are at the edge of the trampoline, because the effect of the bowling ball doesn't affect points C and D so much, because points C and D right at the edge of the trampoline, we can say, for simplicity, that the distance between points C and D are still 10 centimeters. Okay? So now, let's say you have this same thing happening in space. Let's say you have planet Earth, and then you have some distant planet somewhere, or some astronaut somewhere far away. That's C and D. And the curvature of space-time is curving under the planet Earth. And then somewhere out in space, you have points C and D. And let's say they're 10 kilometers apart. And the points A and B, which is just under Earth, they were also actually 10 kilometers apart. But because Earth is there, the distance between them has increased because the curvature of space-time has increased. Now let's get a particle of light. It's coming through space. As it comes through point A, now it has to travel along that curvature under the Earth and reach point B. So it travels a distance greater than 10 kilometers. But when that same particle of light continues traveling and it goes to C and D, it travels 10 kilometers. Again, speed of light is constant. So for a person on the Earth planet, where the curvature is greater, the distance has increased, right? Because points A and B, because they're curved, the distance that light particle has to travel has increased. Whereas for the person far away, the distance that the light particle has to travel is just 10 kilometers. So again, speed equals distance over time. If distance increases, then time has to increase as well. Therefore, a person on planet Earth, he sees that the light travels from point A to B. It's taking a longer time for light to travel from point A to B, just under the Earth, than it is for someone far away, where the curvature is, there's no curvature at points C and D. Does that make sense so far? Okay, so what his theory of general relativity says is that when you're in a heavy curvature of space-time, because the mass of an object is really heavy, time passes for you much slower than it does for someone where the curvature of space-time is flat. And they've actually done experiments to confirm this. For example, they got two different clocks. They put one clock right on the ground, on the ground of the Earth, and they put another clock right on the top of the highest skyscraper buildings. And they found that the clock which is on the top of the skyscraper building was ticking faster than the clock which is on the ground. Why? Because the clock which is on the ground is affected by the curvature of space-time much more than the clock far away from the surface of the Earth, where the curvature is relatively flat. So if I took two clocks, I put one on Earth and I put one on Jupiter, the clock on Jupiter would tick slower than the clock on Earth, because Jupiter is heavier than Earth, and therefore the curvature of space-time is much greater on Jupiter than it is on planet Earth. And this is exactly how your GPS works. Your GPS works by the instrument in your car connecting and communicating with satellites which are in space. But the clocks which are on the satellite, they're actually ticking at a much faster rate than the clocks which are on the ground here. Therefore, there's a calibration, there's a change to accommodate the distance that it's taking you to get to a certain place. So when your GPS tells you, okay, the estimated time to get from where you are to where you want to go is 10 minutes, that time duration is calculated by general relativity. Now, how does this relate to Shastra? We see in Shastra the story of Kakudmi, and we see in Shastra the story of Lord Brahma when he comes to steal Krishna's cowherd friends. When Brahma comes to steal Krishna's cowherd friends, he puts them in a cave, and then he goes to Brahmaloka, and he just stays there for one moment, and then he comes back down to earth. But in earth, 1 year has passed. That means time is actually going much slower in Brahmaloka than it is on earth. Again, let's look at Maharaj Kakudmi. He had a daughter called Revati. She was a very beautiful, it's explained, girl with a lot of really good qualities. And he had to, her father, Kakudmi, wanted to marry her off to a really suitable person. So he said, let me go to Brahmaloka to visit Lord Brahma. Let him decide, some really far-out personality, to marry my daughter. So he goes there, he takes his daughter to Brahmaloka, and it's explained that at that point in time, Lord Brahma is watching a performance. The Gandharvas are performing a performance, and he's watching that. So he doesn't get to ask Lord Brahma straight away. Finally, after some time in Brahmaloka, the performance finishes, and he asks Lord Brahma, so, I've come here from planet Earth, and I want to find a suitable suitor for my daughter. Do you have anyone in mind? Brahma starts laughing at him. He says, for the duration of time that you've waited here on Brahmaloka, 27 or 28 Chatur Yugas have passed on Earth. So any potential suitor that you had in mind to marry your daughter from Earth, they have died. Their sons have died, their great-grandson. Lineages and lineages of ancestors have come and gone. So there's no one left on Earth for you to marry, whom you may have had in your mind before. Therefore, I suggest you marry your daughter to some exceptional personality who's not influenced by time. So marry Lord Balaram. So then they come back to Earth, it's explained. I think this story is in Mahabharata. I'm not sure if it's in Bhagavatam. Maybe it's mentioned slightly in Bhagavatam, I can't remember. But they come back to Earth and they see that because so much time has passed on Earth, millions and millions of years has passed on Earth, compared to, let's say, 1 hour in Brahmaloka that they were there. It's explained that when they saw people, they saw that they had shrunk in size, and the conditions of Earth were like really terrible, not like how it was when they left. So, this is a concept of how time is relative in our Shastra. Before Einstein came up with the theory of relativity, that time is changeable and experienced differently by different people according to where they are in the universe, people would have laughed at something like this. Well, time is constant everywhere, they would have said. How can your Shastras say that time in some other planet is different, it's slower compared to time here? But that's how advanced our Shastras are. This theory of relativity was conceived in 1905, about 120 years ago. But our Shastras are more than 5,000 years old, and they're already talking about concepts like time dilation, concepts of how time is experienced different by different observers in different regions of the universe. So if you were to apply the theory of relativity to what we understand in Shastra, these two examples, one could say that Brahmaloka is such an enormous and heavy planet, somehow, that the time there, the curvature of space-time is so vast that time is ticking there very, very slow. That's why Brahma's lifespan is very, very big. Whereas Earth is just an insignificant speck, and it's not curving space-time as much. Therefore, time is relatively, it's ticking much more faster on Earth. Now, we don't know if that's true, but if we were to apply the theory of relativity to what we see in Shastra, then we could come to that conclusion. But my point is that we need to apply scientific knowledge to prove what Shastra is saying, because Shastra ultimately, as we understand, is the absolute truth. So it's just something interesting I was thinking about past couple of weeks, and I shared it with a couple of devotees, and sometimes I had to draw pictures to explain it, but I wanted to explain it more for myself so that once I explained it, I'd be more confident to tell other people about it as well, to explain it further to other people. But yeah, it just shows how time is a concept that's so beyond us, and that's why, because it's beyond us, it represents Krishna. Krishna is the impersonal manifestation of, or time is the impersonal manifestation of Krishna. So finish here, any questions or comments? You mean like Boma Vrindavan? Their consciousness is spiritualized, but their bodies are still being affected by time, just like anyone else. Otherwise, devotees would, if their bodies were beyond time, then devotees wouldn't age. Devotees wouldn't, materially die, but they do. So it's not that they're not affected by a time; they are affected by time, but their consciousness is within the spiritual world. So time still affects devotees. But then, again, I bring that back to that example of Hanumat Preseka Maharaj, who said that when he was installing, Prabhupada was installing, I think, Radha Parishishwar, how one of the deities was falling down as Prabhupada was giving the class. And just before the devotees who were in the class could realize what was happening, Prabhupada had already gotten off his Vyasasana and caught that deity. So Maharaj used that as an example to say that Prabhupada was beyond time, when he wanted to be, because he was Krishna's servant. And time is Krishna. So even in the yogic siddhis as well, you can alter material laws. And Prabhupada was mentioning that several purports ago in relation to how Brahma, he swallowed all the air around him after he performed his tapasya. Srimad Bhagavatam was explaining that a few verses back, if you read, 3, 4, 5 verses back. There was a lot of wind created after Brahma was sitting on the lotus flower, and he performed his tapasya. So because he was so strong because of performing his tapasya, Brahma just swallowed up all the air. Prabhupada mentions the point that he was able to do that because he performed severe tapasya, he was empowered by the Supreme Lord. So yogis are in some way empowered. Devotees are fully empowered because they're servants of Krishna. So if devotees want, pure devotees, they can potentially, be beyond time or be beyond gravity or all that sort of stuff. And we see that in Chaitanya Lila as well. I forgot, Rasikananda Thakur or someone, how he got on that stick and then he started flying around just to convince the people that Bhakti Yoga is so great, like that. So, yes and no. Sorry? Yeah, I guess so. And that too if Krishna wants to empower them in that way. When devotees ask, Prabhupada, where's your siddhis? Prabhupada said, my siddhi is converting mlechas into bhaktas. So that's the real siddhi. Okay, thank you. Grantaraj Srimad Bhagavatam ki jai, Srila Prabhupada ki jai.